million savings than our forecast. In facilities renewal and operating cost, sick time and availability of our trades saw us have a cost pressure there of $2.8 million. And then in caretaking, as you know, our collective agreements only allow for attrition of permanent staff. So over the year, we did attrit down to our current complement of caretakers, but in year, it costs about $11.1 million. And then lastly, there were other savings across the district in various areas that attributed to about an $8 million increase in central savings versus our projection of $10 million, and these aren't discretionary expenditures, non-labor. So overall, our expenses were about $4.2 million over what we anticipated, and net, we netted out at the 12.4, which is what we're saying our compliance is. Again, as noted at the bottom of page 10, this did include use of 15.9 of proceeds to this disposition approved by the ministry. Our remaining balance of POD for the trustees is $245.5 million as of August 31st. I'll now turn it over to Stephanie Harris to walk you through the trust financial statements in Appendix B of the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The draft financial statements are included on agenda page 50 of your report. The trust fund is used to record donation revenue, which provides student scholarships and support for enhancements at schools across the board. Consistent with the prior year, the auditor's draft opinion is qualified because they are not able to ascertain the completeness of the donation revenue, and it is material to the financial statements. This qualification was noted in the Deloitte's planning report, which was presented in June, and is common with entities which depend primarily on donations as a source of revenue. The total trust assets at the end of the year are $12.9 million, up slightly from the prior year, and reflect the net activity in almost 1,200 trust accounts. You will note that the current year cash balance is $3.2 million. It's held at CIBC, and there's a further $9.6 million investment held at the Royal Bank, which is currently paying interest at a rate tagged to CORA. Revenue exceeded expenses throughout the year by $190,000. Investment income is higher this year, primarily due to the increased rates that we were able to earn on the investment, which was only invested in partway through 22-23. And so we have benefit from a full year this year as well as higher rates. You will notice that donation revenue decreased from $263,000 in the prior year to $75,000, and that was primarily due to a one-time donation in the prior year. And finally, educational program expenses are up $143,000 year over year, and again, that's primarily due to one-time expenses associated with one trust fund. At this time, I am happy to answer any additional questions you may have on the trust statements.
So through you, Madam Chair, I'll just continue with the report. We'll take questions at the end if that's all right. So looking at the resource implications on page 11, so we had to use $12.4 million of internally appropriated reserves to cover the in-year deficit. Appendix C provides detailed schedule of those reserves, but on this report, we've also covered those as we can. It's important to note that using 12.4 of our reserves has brought us to a very low point and close to depletion of our reserves. As the trustees will be aware, the board was requested to submit a 2-year deficit recovery plan that was presented to the board in August of 24. We will continue to update trustees any changes to this plan as a part of the 25-26 budget process. In the chart on the middle or the bottom portion of page 11, you'll see the use of funds that was to cover the operating deficit. And I'd like to take a moment to walk you through them. So as you can see, working funds, we did not have any working funds to balance the budget this year, so we had to look at our other reserves. So our benefit funds on deposit, which is here to cover any fluctuations in our future employee benefits, was depleted to zero to partially offset.
Excuse me for 1 second. Trustee Arts?
Could staff refer to the pages of the actual documents? I don't have the front to back. I have eScribe, I have separate documents, and there's page numbers on them. There's no page 12
Oh,
in the
sorry.
documents. that
So
are-
this is in the resource implication section of the report, is where I am
So
right now. Does that help?
Which appendix?
Sorry, I'll
Agenda
have to,
page 11.
let me just
No, I
pull
don't,
up,
it's not formatted like that in the eScribe.
let me pull up
I
eScribe.
don't-
If you go on the board website, use the PDF. No. Okay.
No, just one moment, I'll pull it up and I'll be with you.
So there's like 5 or 6 appendices, and they each have page numbers.
The resource page, give me 30 seconds, I'll just bring.
Page 62. Page 62.
Sorry?
Page 62.
No, it's not formatted that way. It's appendix.
No, this is not,
This isn't the appendix,
this
we're
is,
talking about the
Appendix
report.
C has the details.
Appendix
I'm
C.
going to the cover, in the body of the report, we also provide the transaction values.
In the report, it's in the report itself, under action plan and associated timelines.
So let me just,
Just wait 1 second.
yeah, I'm just gonna pull it up myself so I can see if I.
This is an item 6.1.
Sorry, this is,
Yes, it's item 6.1.
6.1. So I have the financial statement and then 5 appendices.
Right, but we're not in the appendices.
I'm page 5 of 8 of the eScribe report.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. So as I said a moment ago, we had no working funds, which is your general account that can be used for any contingency. As a result, we had to look at other reserves, and the first one was the benefit funds on deposit. This is typically a reserve set aside to, for fluctuation in future employment benefit plans. So should we see fluctuations of a negative type in coming years, they'll hit our financial statements immediately now, as opposed to be pushed against the reserve. Also, you'll see the school support fund, which started the year at 16 million. We drew 2.7 of that and remains at 13.3 million. This reserve is for 2 purposes. Primarily, it's the school budget carryover, and it is to supply IT projects that have been completed at year end. If either of those costs are above what the reserve is, again, it would hit the bottom line. And similarly, the environmental legacy fund, which is our carbon credits, was not touched, but a small amount was pulled out of our artificial turf reserve. Again, this reserve is there to support the refurbishment of the turf fields when it's needed. And so again, there's only $1 million left in that reserve. So again, we are very close to depletion. The last item, which is committed sinking fund interest earned, is not really available for compliance. It's an accounting treatment on previous debt and is not really compliant. So really, if our leftover compliance is really $16.7 million, or approximately 0.5% of our operating budget. So the depletion of reserves is a concern for staff. With that, Madam Chair, I'm going to just take a few moments to go through some high-level variances for this trustees in the financial statements themselves. So in the balance sheet, you'll notice between years a significant change in our investments to our cash. Investments went down by about $100 million, and our cash equivalents, page 4 of the financial statement, sorry, I apologize. And our cash went up by almost 200 million. The reason for that is the investments were cashed out, as well as because we have accrued for FO and we've been paid by the ministry for FO's collective agreement and that not yet locally ratified, we're carrying a large cash balance that'll be paid out once FO locally ratifies their agreement. As well, in accounts payable, you'll see a significant increase, and that again is and accrued liabilities. That is the increase for the FO accrual, as well as the principal and vice principals. That'll be paid out some point in 24-25. On page 5 of the report, in the consolidated statement of operations, I'll just point out a couple of things for you. In the provincial grants other, you'll see $385 million, which is a variance over last year of 84 million, over a budget of 62 million. And that again is the money coming in for Bill 124. that wasn't anticipated when we developed the budget that came through. In the other expenses, other programs, there is about 130 million there for salaries and benefits. That again was part of the retros to be paid. And I believe that's the end of what I have to present. I'll turn it over to our auditors. One other subsequent event you'll see was the sale of Scarlet Heights that happened after the year end as a subsequent event. And I will turn it over to our auditors now to do their report, then we can take the questions either now, Madam Chair, from staff, or you want to wait to hear the auditors. We can do all statements at once.
I think let's wait. Maybe if you can identify yourselves, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Thank you so much through you, Madam Chair. My name is Lillian Chung. I'm the audit partner from Deloitte. I'm very pleased to be here with you today to share the results of our audit of the TDSB's financial statements, including those financial statements of the trust funds. I'm joined by a new face to you today, my senior manager, Edson Montero. He is replacing our previous audit manager who has left our Canadian offices to pursue other interests in New York. So very pleased to be here. My report starts on Appendix D and page 66 of your overall package. We're pleased to present the results of the audit to you today. As the committee will recall, back in June of this year, we had presented our audit plan to you at that point and identifying a few key areas of audit risks for the year, which we would focus on as part of our audit, as well as our overall audit materiality, which drives the extent of performance of audit testing that we perform as part of our overall audit. We're very pleased to be here to present to you and to report to you that at this point, our audit procedures are substantially complete, with the exception of a few outstanding items that we have identified as part of our overall executive summary. We were able to conduct our audit in line with the audit risk areas that we had identified back when we presented our plan to you in June. You will recall that as part of that plan, we did identify a few areas that are new in the current fiscal year relating to our audit, very much in line with what Executive Officer Snyder had already mentioned previously in terms of Bill 124, as well as new accounting standards this year that apply to the school board. I will ask Edson to speak to the audit risk areas shortly after I go through the rest of the executive summary. In terms of the overall audit materiality, back at the presentation of the audit plan, we mentioned that we would determine our overall audit materiality based on 1% of total expenses of the consolidated financial statements of the school board. We are confirming back to you that that ends up being an overall materiality level of $36 million, consistent with our plan. What this materiality level does is it allows us to step back at the conclusion of the audit, assess all of the uncorrected misstatements that are identified as part of the audit, and then assess whether or not the financial statements overall are materially misstated. This is a very high threshold, but this is also the overall threshold. Of more importance to the committee is that we actually are required under our auditing standards to report back to you on any misstatements at 5% of this materiality level, which translates to around $1.8 million on a transactional level. So that is much lower and is our reporting threshold to you. I'm very pleased to report that there are no uncorrected misstatements that were identified as part of the audit. There is one adjusted item which has been identified by management as part of their overall financial reporting process relating to amortization of asset retirement obligations that has been reflected and corrected in these financial statements themselves. As I've mentioned before, we do have a few outstanding items that are identified at this point. They are largely complete at this point in the audit, but at the time of mailing, we're still outstanding. We do have a few housekeeping items that we do need to complete before we can finalize and issue our audit opinion, but we are expecting to be able to issue a clean overall audit opinion on the financial statements. We did identify a few key highlights in our executive summary as well for your information, but they also relate to the items that we've already spoken about relating to Bill 124 as well as the new accounting standards. But with that, I think I'll ask Edson to speak to the audit risk areas that we've identified as well as the results of our work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian, and good evening. I'm on page 68 of your overall package. The first area that you see here is with regards to revenue recognition. Some of the procedures that we perform included testing the internal controls around revenue. We also perform a combination of detailed
Excuse
tests.
me, do you just want to bend the mic a bit more closer to your, just bend it down a bit, so it's like that, yeah. You'll pick
Like
up your
that?
voice better.
Sounds better? Thank you. Sorry, with regards to revenue recognition, you will see in our report that some of the procedures that we perform included performing a substantive analytical procedures combined with detailed testing and also confirmation. So we did send confirmation letters to the Ministry of Education, and the City of Toronto used those replies to agree to the amounts recorded in the financial statements. Moving along, the next area is what we call management override or controls. It's at the bottom of this page, and some of the procedures that we perform included discussion with fraud with you, with the audit committee, also with management, and we also tested a sample of journal entries that were posted during the year. On the next page, I'm now page 69, you will see that with regards to school-generated funds and school council funds, we tested a samples of schools. We also confirmed bank balances with the financial institutions, and we also tested some of the internal controls at that level. You will see later on our reports that we have a specific recommendation with regards to this testing. With regards to government transfers related to capital contributions, we tested in detail some of the transactions that were recorded in the financial statements and in the records of the school board, including those assets and, tangible capital assets, and the revenue that is amortized as the amortization expense is recorded or recognized during the year. Moving along, with regards to payroll, we perform a test of details on non-school-based employees and then substantive analytical procedures on school-based employees' payroll. We also tested the implications of the impact of Bill 124. You will see later on another page details on that specific testing. With regards to management judgments and accounting estimates, we assess all the estimates that are required. Management needs to incur in order to prepare the consolidated financial statements. Based on the testing that we have performed, we did not identify any evidence of material misstatements with regards to the judgments and estimates from management. And then we have a couple of areas that are new this year. The first one is adoption of new PSAS accounting standards. We received from management their position memos, and then we went over them to conclude that we agree with their assumptions, with their conclusions. And also there were a couple of significant accounting policies that were included in Note 2 to the consolidated financial statements. With regards to Bill 124, we tested test of details with regards to the amounts that were received by the board via the grants for student needs and also TPA. We also tested at the detail levels the amounts that were a payout. And as you can see here, we're still currently trying to wrap up the testing, but as so far we have not identified any issues with this testing. If I can just please take your attention to the next page, page 72, wanted to say that the school board is considered to be a significant component for the province of Ontario consolidated financial statements. Therefore, we have been in communication with the Office of the Auditor General of Ontario. They require certain information from us.
Perfect. Thank you, Edson. We'll go fairly quickly over the rest of the report. There are a number of other sections in the report that cover significant judgment areas that we wanted to flag for the committee's information, but they are largely consistent with previous years. We do have a number of required appendices as well, covering off our required communication requirements with you. And as well, you would have noted that as part of our package, we also included a management letter of recommendations outlining 2 areas of recommendations that we've identified based on this year's audit. They're highlighted in Appendix 6. One relates to our school visits and school-generated funds and school council funds. These observations do largely remain fairly consistent from year over year, but for the committee's information, on an annual basis, we visit 10 schools, and based on those specific visits and observations, we do have differing observations on an annual basis as a result of those visits. We also included one other recommendation as it relates to formal documentation of IT change requests in the current year, but both of these areas have been shared with management and their responses are also contained. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I will pause at this time.
Thank you very much to everyone presenting. We have external member Pilkey on the list first. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just going to move it so I can see it over here. Sorry. Okay, I do have several questions. Thank you very much to you, Madam Chair. The first question, overall question for Deloitte. Did Deloitte perform any other additional engagements for the TDSB this year in addition to the audit?
We did not.
Okay, thank you. The financial statements refer to the TRC ARO. Could you tell me what the TRC stands for? ARO, I understand, asset.
It's TCA, ARO, so it's
Oh,
tangible capital
sorry, I
assets.
wrote it down wrong. TCA, yeah, what is that?
It's the ARO relating to tangible capital assets. That's the
Oh,
term
okay.
that the ministry uses.
Okay. All right, I wasn't sure if that was that or if it was related to something else. Okay, that's helpful. When on page 72, you refer to the AGO. This is exterior to the audit that will be released tomorrow. That's correct? This is based on the financial statements that they do for
That's
the
correct.
province as opposed to the type of audit that they've been doing at the TDSB for a year and a half?
That's correct. This is actually an annual communication that they've always done with us relating to their own audit of the provincial accounts.
Okay, thank you. The significant judgment and estimates, the issue around pay equity. This may be through you, Madam Chair, to staff. Has any of this money ever been paid out, or are we just continuing to accrue this money?
Through you, Madam Chair, we're continuing to accrue. We are currently working on the QP pay equity, and it continues, and we're about to start the non-union pay equity program.
Through you to staff, Madam Chair, to staff, do we have any timeline for this? I mean, I have been on this committee for a number of years, as many of you know, and I think this has been there for a many number of years. The likelihood that we will pay out anytime in the future?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it's very difficult to determine the timeline for QP's pay equity. We are in constant meetings with them, and progress is slow. I would expect the non-union pay equity to start in around the February timeframe with training, and I think it'll likely be completed within 2 years.
And I presume that as this goes along, the amount just continues to grow.
Through you, Madam Chair, our intention would be for the QP2, and as soon as we have a measurable number on the non-union, we would start accruing for that as well.
And again, through you to staff, through you, Madam Chair, to staff, will this amount be funded by the province, or will the board have to find this money? Or is this just?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think we will try to advocate with the ministry for funding for both of these, but I am likely that we will have to pay it ourselves internally.
But we've continued to accrue it each year, so we've reflected that every year in the statements.
Yes, we're accruing on the QP pay equity annually. We have not done any accrual for non-union at this point.
Okay, thank you. I think that was most of my questions. The other question on the management letter, is there any changes in the management maybe through you to Deloitte? Is there any change in the management letter, or is this consistent with last year?
It is consistent with the comment as it relates to IT is new.
Hey, which number would that be?
That would be number 2. There's only 2 findings.
I'm set on the rep letter?
Oh, sorry.
Management
Management
letter,
representation letter? No, there are no. Management representation letter, the only change relates to the new adoption standards.
Okay, thank you. And that would be my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any other people that have some questions? Thank you very much. Trustee Arts, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a request. So it's not really material to my understanding, but it would be extremely helpful if in the tables, some of the tables have notes and appendices with explanations and some do not. It would be nice if that was a consistent practice. So like the statement of operations, one of the line items under expenses is pupil accommodation, which is then separate from school instruction, separate from school operations and maintenance. It would be helpful to understand what things like pupil accommodation, other programs, and school-funded activities actually apply to.
So you, Madam Chair, yes, happy to answer the question. So school operation and maintenance is our facilities department, staff for maintenance, for caretaking and utilities. And pupil accommodation would be our operational expenditures amortized for our capital work. So whether it be renewal or SCI or good places to learn, that would be the expense of the amortization portion of the amount.
So I think what the trustee is asking for, if those explanations can be provided as notes in the tables moving forward.
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, because pupil accommodation is also the terminology we use for special education, which is programming, not facilities.
Yes, that's one of the challenges.
So clarifying
Yep.
which parts of these
Happy
are,
to do that.
and administration applies to board administration, not specifically school administration.
Right, no, that isn't, I had double checked with my staff. That's only, Cherie, that's only board administration, is only central staff, it's not school administrative staff. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, those clarifications would be helpful for these big
We can
categories.
do that in future
Thank you.
editions.
Thank you very much for those comments. Anyone else have any questions?
I do have one additional question, trustee.
Please go ahead, Ms. Pilkey.
And I think Ms. Chow had her hand up as well.
Not see that.
It's actually it's not a huge question, but the trust fund statements, the part that is the endowment, is there intention to spend any of that, or is that, because that never seems to have any expenses against it or any distributions? I'm just curious.
I'll go to staff.
So you, Madam Chair, I'll ask Stephanie Harris to answer that.
So the endowment expenses are moved into the restricted fund annually.
Okay,
So there are expenses,
there are expenses.
yes.
They just don't show up in the statement.
They don't show up on the, but there is no disclosure in note 8, which does assist with breaking that down.
So is the money that's spent out of the endowment is discretionary then?
It's consistent with the requirements of the endowment, but yes, it gets spent out of the operating fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, then, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I have a question.
Oh, okay. Please, Ms. Cho, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Two questions. One is just more like a procedural thing. I think the audit committee doesn't approve the financials, right? We recommend the approval to the board of trustees. So I think under 6.1A, the wording needs to change to reflect that.
No, we approve.
Because can you hear me?
So we're just checking with board services.
The preamble to that says we recommend.
Is it?
See, it is recommended that we approve.
But we don't approve it. We recommend the approval.
Yes,
the board.
Madam Chair, the
We
board
recommend
of
it be
trustees
approved.
approve the financial statements ultimately.
Yeah.
The
But we're
committee
recommending.
recommends the approval to the board.
Yeah.
That's how it's written.
Is it? How come we?
Just below below recommendation, you say it is recommended, full colon, and then it goes A, B, C.
Is recommended.
It's on the
We're
screen as well.
recommending to the board that they be approved. That's the way it's written.
Oh, I'm just sorry. I'm reading it slightly different. Probably just me.
Okay, just wait 1 second. Mr. Nortes, will you please explain?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Joy Chow. Thank you for the question. As has been suggested, the act of any of our committees is to bring a recommendation to the full Board of Trustees. Our convention, with regards to how the report flowing from this meeting will indicate, if this doesn't in fact get passed by the audit committee, that it was the audit committee recommending to the Board of Trustees that A, B, and C, the financials, be approved. The ultimate
Okay.
decision will rest with the Board of Trustees.
Okay. Okay, good. Thanks for clarifying that. So the second question I had was under resource implications, use of the reserve funds to the deficit. There's a note that references the 2-year deficit recovery plan. I'm kind of curious whether the audit committee, especially the external members, can get a quick overview what the highlights of this deficit recovery plan entails. I'm just seeing our reserves being diminished year after year, and it doesn't really have a healthy balance right now. And I'm kind of curious what deficit recovery plan has been presented.
So through you, Madam Chair, in the development of the budget for 24-25, we went to the ministry to ask for additional use of proceeds of disposition. The ministry responded back that they'd like to see the board approve a 2-year deficit recovery plan that stopped the reliance on proceeds of disposition. That report was presented to board through the FBAC committee in August of this year, and you can find it on our board website, and we can send you a link to that separately to all the external members. But that is the deficit recovery plan we're referring to on page 11.
We'll be happy to send the link.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much. That'd be great.
Anything further?
No, not from me. Thank
you
you.
very much. Trustee Arts.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. This one is actually with regards to the recommendations from Deloitte, but is to staff. I note that what was noted this year for school generated funds and school council managed funds has been an ongoing issue. That accounting's not done properly, bank deposits, disbursements, reimbursements are not handled as per expectations, documents aren't filed as per expectations. We are one of the only or few school boards that allow school councils to bank separately from schools. So I do note that there's a management response to the recommendations. But are we going to explore a greater shift? This is the management. I know the training that's in place for school councils and office administrators, and I know the communication that goes out to school councils every year with regards to school council fundraising and their funds, and it doesn't really seem to move the bar. So I believe this is a significant risk, considering, and I forget the number, I was just looking at it, they significant millions of dollars in fundraising that go through our schools. Will we be looking at something more concrete to reduce our risk in terms of school council managed funds?
Through you, Madam Chair, we've been trying for quite a while, staff, to bring this forward as an issue because, as you say, we're one of the few school boards that allows school councils to have separate accounts. We do ask them to try to bank with our institution so that we have access to their accounts so we can support them through our school support team. And we have some that aren't. Going back a long time, and I can't remember how many years, when PSAP first came in, there was a concern by parent councils that when we had to report school council funds on the financial statements, it was a cash grab by the province to take the money and reduce the funding. And I tried my very best during that whole process to continue to say this was not the case. It was an accounting standard. We saw several school councils move to home and school associations, and we tried very diligently to tell them not to because of the risks. And we have heard over time of a couple of school councils that have had come into CRH issues because they don't keep the record as one treasurer leaves, the next come on, and then the filing falls behind with CRA. We're happy to take this back and look again and bring some recommendations through audit or through FBAC to the board, but it is a very politically sensitive. Our parents are concerned about control of their funds and how it works. We try to reiterate to them that we are not ever going to grab their funds. We'll keep them separate accounting and make sure they have full transparency on it, but they are hesitant to put it within our bank accounts, and we've heard that clearly from PIAC when we met with them earlier this year when we transferred to our accounts to CIPC when Alterna shut down its operation. But it is something we're trying to move forward, and we will continue to bring it forward as best we can and see if we can get them into one account. Simplifies things. We also, through Stephanie Harris' leadership, we are looking this year to do two major things. One being doing, now I'm going to forget the names of them, Stephanie, the cash, the two projects you have on go.
Yeah, so I'll just add a couple of things. So through the switch to CIBC, the corporate banker, we have had more interest from school councils in moving towards CIBC as a bank because it offers more convenient locations. There's no associated fees. So we're really making an effort to push the transition to our corporate bank, and we have been successful with convincing a number of councils. I also want to add that we do ensure that PSAB reports are obtained twice annually from any school that has their own separate bank account. So we're very strict about ensuring the timely follow-up and receipt of those. And if we find any problems with receiving those documents, we would be working with those school councils to move them over to the corporate banker. So more on an exceptional basis if they're not complying with our requirements. I also want to add that we do believe the draft fundraising policy, which contains language that would have the principal approve all school council expenditures or pre-approve those, will also help us improve the control environment because the principal would be involved in the decision-making for disbursements. So I do think those things, along with the enhancements that Craig mentioned, which are further use of school cash online, which will minimize the use of cash at schools, and the use of POS machines. We're hoping that sort of all of these things together. I appreciate that there's challenges and there's many schools and many players involved, but we're hoping continued effort in all of these areas will help us to see improvements. And just for the committee's benefit, the school council balance at the end of 22-23, I should have the current year balance, but was about $5 million. So although there are issues noted, in the magnitude is spread across many schools is not as significant as perhaps it appears based on the recommendations.
Okay, I would think in terms of, in addition to the changes that are already there, that requiring school councils to bank with our banker, whether it's their own account or with the school, would be a minimum. That a miscellaneous outside bank accounts is no longer an acceptable practice. It is a two-way street. I know they're volunteers. I've done the treasurer role for many years at a school council. I know but it is a two-way street, and if the compliance isn't coming along, with the changes, then, we have to make sure that we are mitigating our risk.
Yes. And so we are, like I say, continue to work on it. As Stephanie said, between the having no fees, which is very attractive for them to move to CIBC, as well as when we get the point of sale terminals, and we can link them into that, taking less cash handling away and making it more streamlined. We're hopeful that everybody can see the value of what we're trying to provide them, as well as the support that Stephanie and her team do with school councils answering their questions. It's a lot easier when you have access to their account, can see it and view the transactions, and then you can help out as well. So we're trying our very best, and as it goes through GPC, the fundraising policy, hopefully with that change, the principal has to be one of the signers. Again, it'll bring that transparency to it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything further? Then thank you. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for the recommendations that can be found on the front page of the report on the fiscal year 2023-2024 audited financial statements. Thank you. Trustee Arts moved. Trustee McLean second. All in favor? Those online, can you please say aye? Because I can't see hands.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you very much. Any opposed? Thank you very much. That carries. Moving to our next item, which are a series of internal audit reports. 7.1 is the internal audit department update in schools operations for 2023-2024.
And
7.1.
through you, Madam Chair, I'll turn this over to Stephanie Harris, who in Wasa's absence is supporting the internal audit department at TDSB.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to introduce item 7.1, which is the internal audit update and the results of the 23-24 school operational audits, which begins on page 97 of the package. And I'm going to speak primarily to Appendix A of this item 7.1. During 23-24, the internal audit team completed 23 school audits as planned. These audits tested a variety of operational, financial, and compliance controls at the schools. The sample selection ensured that at least one school was audited from each learning network, and the focus of the sample selection was on schools that had new principals. The detailed audit results and action plans were shared with each impacted school and their superintendent of education. A summary of findings have also been shared with impacted central staff and senior leadership. I just want to highlight that 83% of the tests performed during the school audits found controls to be working as required. Agenda page 100, so that is the second page of Appendix 2, notes the higher frequency findings that were identified. For each higher frequency item, the report is structured to provide the context of the control being tested, a summary of the observations and recommendations made by internal audit, and their recommendations, and a management response with follow-up actions to address the issue. Internal audit, consistent with prior years, will monitor the corporate and school action plans and intend to complete follow-up procedures within 2 years. We recognize that the board has many new staff each year, and the results of this report are an important learning opportunity, not only for those schools that were audited, but to assist more broadly in communicating areas of improvement across the board and enhance our training for administrators and office staff. And I will now briefly speak to the key findings and next steps that we've noted in the report. An issue was noted with tracking of one-to-one computer devices was noted in 52% of schools tested, and in 22% of schools, issues were noted more broadly with the tracking of IT assets. A principal dashboard is being launched by IT services in the coming weeks, and we believe that this will assist with schools in tracking their purchase assets and maintaining the appropriate inventory. The second point noted, all schools audited did have a safe arrival process in place. However, in approximately a third of schools, there was no evidence that management or the management's designate had consistently reviewed the exceptions noted in the safe arrival report. And furthermore, in 30%, at least one instance of lack of follow-up for unexplained absences was noted. As part of these results, schools were recommended to ensure that the attendance call-out report exceptions be reviewed as soon as the report was generated, with a decision being made to appropriate follow-up actions. We do believe that the implementations of Power Schools did impact the results, and want to point out that new administrators and office staff who are involved in attendance will be recommended to a training, which is currently offered broadly multiple times monthly. The next point, in 30% of schools, it was noted that outdated health and safety reports were posted to the school website, and 22% of schools had at least one issue noted with the completion of mandatory logbooks for fire prevention and mechanical system. Furthermore, in 17% of schools, it was noted required fire and lockdown drills were either not completed or had been completed but failed to be logged. Facility services will ensure that team leads review logbooks to ensure they're being completed as required, and additional training will be provided to ensure all FTLs, caretaking, and engineering staff know about the required checks and the required tracking. In the fall of 2024, a presentation about mandatory fire and lockdown drills was made to all superintendents of education, and facility services intends to send messages twice annually to principals to ensure they are aware of the requirements and to ensure compliance. The next two issues noted relate to cash handling and financial records associated with school-generated funds, which I know we've touched on briefly as part of the Deloitte report. Annually, approximately $10 million in cash is collected by schools. The audits noted that in 57% of schools, the use of cash lists to support deposit amounts was not consistently observed. In 47% of schools, there was a discrepancy, at least one discrepancy noted between the deposit log and the bank statements, and a further 39% of schools had issues noted with the physical security of their safe. And an example of that would be the safe being left open with the key nearby. The safe left open or the safe shut, but with the key in visible access nearby. In response to these findings, the finance support officers assigned to each school have been aware of the findings, and they will continue to reinforce key requirements for cash handling and continue to recommend training, which is provided on an ongoing basis to all administrators and office staff. And furthermore, we will encourage staff who are obviously in need of training. We will make the recommendation either to their principal or the superintendent if we believe that training is required, more than just recommending it. As we already mentioned, business services goal in 24-25 is to expand the use of school cash online through the use of an additional module for school councils, as well as the introduction of POS terminals at our school, which will be linked to KEV School Cash Online, which is the accounting system used by schools. We believe that both of these initiatives will mitigate cash handling risks by reducing the overall need for cash handling at schools. As we previously mentioned, there were findings identified with school council financial records. In 35% of schools, it was noted that the principal did not routinely review the parent council bank statement, or they did review, but the evidence of their sign-off was not available. And 30% of the school councils did not maintain all of their financial records at the school site. We will continue to reiterate these requirements during PIAC presentations, and we will continue to reinforce the use of the corporate banker CIBC, which we universally believe will assist school councils with meeting their requirements. As I mentioned, in addition, the fundraising policy currently in draft includes a requirement for principals to pre-approve expenses, and we believe that this is a very, very important requirement which will help strengthen the control environment. And as I mentioned previously, as a mitigation, financial reports for school councils that use the non-corporate banker are required to be submitted twice annually and approved by the treasurer. So we do believe that that does, while not ideal in monthly, it does provide a mitigation to the findings that I've noted. And finally, with respect to the last finding, there were issues noted with respect to prolonged absences. In 39% of schools, there were instances where prolonged absences were not consistently referred to an attendance counselor. And in 26%, we noted that prolonged absence codes were not consistently used. The planning department will continue to train schools on proper procedures and has recently updated their internal website with information on appropriate tracking for prolonged absences, which we believe will assist with compliance. Furthermore, planning will also increase the frequency of checking for these situations in the student information system. So in closing, I just want to point out that we don't use statistical sampling for school audits, so the results of the audits cannot be extrapolated to all the schools. However, as I noted at the beginning, the results are indicative of general issues that are likely to be occurring at other schools and do support us in planning, training, and other improvement initiatives. And lastly, I just want to mention the internal audit team is currently working on school audits, 25 school audits, which were approved in the annual plan that was approved by the committee in September. So those audits are currently underway for the 24-25 school year. And at this time, I am happy to answer any further questions of the board.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harris. First, we have Trustee McLean.
Thank you, and through the chair, thanks to the team for the report and all the work done. My question largely pertained to the fire and lockdown drills. Can you further break down for me, like 70% of the schools did not conduct or log the appropriate number of fire drills? Well, I would like both those things to take place. I'm far more interested in how many actually didn't do the drills than didn't log them appropriately. So is there a breakdown of,
Whether they just didn't log it or if they didn't do it.
I'm interested in they didn't do it.
Right.
Having them not doing it is a bigger problem for me, although I do want it logged appropriately, but having them not do it is and the same with the, the lockdown drills. Can we break down those 17% and 13% respectively?
Break them down with respect to which schools those are?
No, just the number, like 17% of the schools that you looked
Yep.
didn't complete either of those two things. So I'm trying to chase down, of the 17%, how much is that failed to log, or how much is of the 17% was failure to conduct the test?
So that is 4 noted during the samples that we did at the school audits. I will just note in the management response, the capital services team has indicated that based on their holistic review of 23-24, that 77% of schools across the board, so this isn't pertaining exclusively to the sample we audited, but more broadly, all schools completed mandatory fire drills, and 76% of schools completed the mandatory lockdown drills.
100%.
So those are the statistics with respect to across the board. So by extension, that means, roughly a quarter of each drill was not completed. And in the fall of 2024, additional training and information was provided to superintendents of education, as well as a commitment made to notify principals of any missing drills at 2 times during the year. So we're hoping that those initiatives will improve the compliance with the drill requirements. And I know that Executive Officer Pichetti is online, and I don't know if she has any further comments that she'd like to make.
Thank you. And through the chair, in response to Trustee McLean's question, we have a system set up to send automatic emails in November to all principals. And then a week later, we also send an email to all superintendents for each of their family of schools. We do this twice a year, in the fall and in the spring, as a way to further narrow that gap of schools that may not schedule their fire drills or their lockdown drills within the time frame. So we are trying to make the process of passing on that information more automatic, and it seems to be working, as this year we've seen much greater take up with the schools.
Thank you, and I'll just follow up, if I may, through the chair. Have we, because a lot of these are not expected numbers, but these fire drills and these, lockdown requirement drills are a pretty consistent number. We understand, we have a plan for schools, how many they would have. Can we not create a system that not only reminded them and followed up to remind them, but made it necessary for them to log them appropriately, and at any fixed point in time that the superintendents and executive superintendents would be made aware of schools who weren't compliant? Like, so that no one theoretically could fall through the cracks and someone go on leave assuming that they had been done before, someone come in and not do them, avoid these little situations, because failure to log into a central system would generate a report that indicated this didn't happen, and then we could immediately, take action. Like, it's a little concerning that there's 25% of the time, or 23% of the time that this isn't taking place. And I appreciate that we're doing efforts to change that, but because this is such a finite number, and it would be easy to create a system that required them to come in, indicate they've done it, date, have we contemplated that at any point in time?
I see that the director would like to speak. Did you want to respond to this now?
Yes, please. And I apologize. I'm not going to turn my camera on because I'm not feeling very
Don't
well.
sound well.
So I just wanted to say that this isn't the first time that this has come up, and this is also something that we will see tomorrow with the Auditor General. And so we are making this a priority. We are going to be ensuring that principals are aware, that superintendents are aware, and that executive superintendents are aware of not only the expectation, but that we will be monitoring and following up, because you're right, it's a finite number, it's 6 and 2. So we just know that we just have to do it. And so we will be ensuring that there are processes in place to make sure that it happens. And we do know, given the work that we're doing on it right now, that our expectation is that we will be on track that we are on track for this year. So it's unfortunate that it has taken it to be brought to our attention a number of times, but it is something that we take seriously. It is something that is easy to do and easy to monitor, and we want to make sure that then we're following up on it accordingly, and that it is a priority for superintendents. So I just want to provide that assurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Director, and I'm feeling guilty here. I only asked one question, and the ill person has to leave their sickbed to wander into this. So I feel bad about that. I hope you feel better soon. Thank you for the response.
Thank you very much. May I pass the chair, please, Trustee Arts, to you? Thank you very much. Following up on Trustee McLean's question and your response, Interim Director Zucker, I remember having this exact same conversation last year, just in terms of when these operational issues are found in a selection of schools, what we then do next. And I appreciated in the conclusion, it talks about that we recommend that superintendents incorporate a review of the principal's monthly checklist into their monthly school visits. I think it actually has to be more than that. I think it needs to be a responsibility of superintendents to, first of all, ensure each of their principals have this report, review this report, and ensure that their processes and protocols reflect the issues identified, don't reflect the issues that are identified in the report, and that then the superintendents do have a responsibility every month to ensure that the principals have kept that up. And if there are any issues, then you involve staff, facility staff or financial staff to assist. So I'm wondering, Interim Director Zucker, I don't really need you to speak a lot, but I'm wondering if this can be a discussion or a follow-up action that isn't, I think it has to go beyond the recommendation into a process of what happens with this report and how each and every principal needs to read it, reflect on it in terms of their practices, and then the responsibility of superintendents to follow up. I'm wondering if you could comment through you, Madam Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm happy to take that. So I think a couple of things. I think it's a very good idea that we will share this report with our senior team and walk them through it in detail. The other thing that Stephanie and I have talked about is a two-part. We have a lot of turnover in our school offices. So we are going to, when we see a principal needs training on some of these things, we'll talk to the SOE directly as Stephanie's school support team does their visits on a regular basis to schools. And if we see a school office administrator needs assistance, we'll talk with the principal during our visit, suggest they attend one of our training sessions. As Stephanie pointed out earlier, we have regular ongoing training sessions. So we will elevate it to the superintendents for the principals that we feel need training, and we'll also elevate it to the principals for the OAs when we see an OA struggling with one of these issues. And then again, to your point, we will take this to our senior team and walk them through this report so they're aware as well as they visit their schools.
Thank you very much for that. Just as a follow-up, I'm wondering, and again, I don't have this knowledge and it's really not the purview of the audit committee, but it seems to me that in the interview process for principals or before office administrators take their role, there should be some operational questions and some operational responsibilities, not to wait for training, but to ensure they have done the training. So I just say that through you, Madam Chair, to staff to hear and understand. And then the last thing is, if in fact there is that process established, then it should make next year's report far less, far more compliant. And I just think it needs to be somebody's responsibility and accountability beyond the committee just receiving reports. So I appreciate that through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I believe that the director wants to comment.
Thank you. And through the chair, I just want to say that I think this year is probably better than last year in this area because it is something that we brought to senior team and set out expectations as well as principals. So we will continue to improve. We do have a webinar with principals on December 12th where we will share this report in the Auditor General report with principals to be able to just go over the high level expectations or some of the recommendations that were put forward. So it is an opportunity for us to review that as well as with senior team. So I just want to assure trustees and the external members that this is something that we are taking very seriously, and especially when it has to do with safety of students. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Final comment. Is it helpful or not helpful for a motion from the audit committee? Or you don't feel that's needed? Through you, Madam Chair, to the director.
Thank you for that. And I believe that the work that's happening right now is actually makes me feel that we will be compliant. And again, because it is part of the Auditor General as well as this report, I know that it's an area that we will be following up on. So maybe hold it, and if we were in the same position next year, then by all means, but I don't think it's necessary at this point. But
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take the chair back, and we have Trustee Arts next, and then Ms. Pilkey.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to come back to the prolonged absences piece, and I think maybe it hit home a bit for two reasons. Over the last month, I've been doing attending school improvement visits with my superintendents, and one of the things that the superintendents or my superintendents are asking is about student attendance and attendance supports, and do they have students that need supports? And there's a variety of reasons that students might be taking prolonged absences, but some of the ones that concerned me are not illness or well-being pieces where students are away for that kind of specific reason, but the numbers of families that have been taking extended vacations during school time, and or the unexplained absences, long weekends. And this also came up via discussions, regardless of school board, through my work with OBSPA, that many school boards are seeing significantly increased prolonged absences that are unexplained. So Rainy River District School Board this fall launched a campaign, a public information campaign called 19 Days, because 19 days is equivalent to a month of school days. And 19 days of absences for whatever reasons, it creates a significant negative impact on student learning. And they're launching their 19 days campaign not just to families, but publicly to school partners. So they find that a lot of students are missing a significant amount of time for doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, things that could be scheduled outside of school hours, sports that, go for cheaper rental rates by, having tournaments or things on a Friday instead of on Saturday. These all add up to significant missed time for students. And I do know that we have an attendance report that has been requested. But I'm wondering if not just the amount of individual principals following up with students with prolonged absences. Yes, that one-to-one is important, but I'm wondering if we also need a broader information out to families about the importance of attending school, not having appointments and sporting events and things that aren't critical. Obviously, if your child is sick, they need to stay home. But there's a lot of kids missing school for reasons that are avoidable. And, this significantly impacts their learning. So I've noticed this, and I'm hoping that we can, when that attendance report comes, I don't know when it's coming, but that's been requested, comes, that we can refer back to this data as well that's collected through audit.
Thank you very much. Staff want to respond?
Yes, I see some of my colleagues from the academic team online, so we will incorporate that into the report.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Pilkey, please go ahead.
Thank you. And I guess my comment is also on the similar vein about safe arrival protocols. And I hope that as you discuss this with principals and superintendents that this gets emphasized. I would recall, and I'm sure many staff recall, when particular situation when the safe arrival protocol was not filed and the student had been basically kidnapped from a high school. So I think they're there for a reason, and there is an obligation, I think, on behalf of the board to make sure that these items are followed up, even if there's a lot of students and it's annoying, because there have been situations where it hasn't gone well. And I would hope that staff in the discussions, the same as the prolonged absences and the issue around fire and lockdown, that staff are reminded that these are safety issues and have gone badly in the past. So I would just add my voice to those of other people on the committee about the importance of some of these items in terms of student safety.
Thank you very much. I'm sure staff have noted.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this report? Seeing and hearing none, may I please have a mover and a seconder that the internal audit status update and the 2023-2024 school audit report be received? Thank you, Trustee McLean and Trustee Arts. All in favor, please say aye for those online because I can't see.
Aye. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? No, that carries. Thank you so much. On to the next item on the agenda, which is the Regional Internal Audit Team Audit Plan 2024-2025 and 2025-2026. Mr.
So
Snyder.
through you, Madam Chair, I'll ask our regional auditor, Paula Hatt, to present this report.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, this report, which starts on page 117 of the agenda package, presents the results of the risk assessment that we completed on the board and outlines our proposed 2-year audit plan that requires the audit committee's approval. So as noted on the first page, we are required to develop a risk-based audit plan. Last time we were able to select engagements using the TDSB risk register, but as it hasn't been refreshed, we took a different approach this time and did our own risk assessment. For the purposes of our risk assessment, we defined risk as the possibility of an event occurring that will impact achievement of the board's strategies and objectives. We started with our audit universe that captures the auditable areas across the board. This universe has changed since it was last presented a few years back, as we are trying to align more with other RIATs and approach the risk assessment from a more strategic lens. Our risk assessment involved sending a survey to each area in the audit universe, asking management to rate inherent risk of their area, which is the risk before controls are factored in. This was done by assessing on a 4-point scale the likelihood of an event occurring and the impact it would have on the achievement of the board's objectives, with the 2 scores multiplied to arrive at inherent risk. This is explained further in Appendix A on page 121 or page 5 of this report, which highlights the matrix that we used in scoring inherent risk. We also asked management to rate controls in place for the area, also on a 4-point scale from limited to strong. Appendix B on page 123 or 7 of the report shows the risk assessment results. So for each area in the universe, we've included the inherent risk and controls as assessed by management and reviewed by my team to ensure reasonable. The risk assessment results form one input to our plan, but we do look at other factors before arriving at the proposed engagements. So these factors include the ability of an engagement to provide value for the board. We consulted with management when proposing the engagements to confirm whether they would be value added. We also looked at requests received, as well as considering engagements done in previous years and engagements done at other boards in the region that were seen as adding value. We also ensure that our coverage does not overlap with the TDSB internal auditors. Although our plan is supported by a risk assessment, we also do have resource constraints as we are a shared service with other boards. So in developing our plan, the ministry requires us to complete 2 audit or advisory engagements annually for each board in the region. So moving on to the proposed plan, the 2 engagements that we've included for 2024-25 include an outsourced engagement that would result in the development of a business continuity plan for the board, and also an outsourced cybersecurity audit. And we have noted our rationale for including these engagements. For 25-26, we're proposing a review of records management practices at the board, providing recommendations to address any gaps found and highlighting leading practices found at other boards. We're also proposing an engagement on purchasing and facilities and operations that would include audit steps to ensure controls are operating effectively, as well as an advisory component that would entail reviewing the workflow to identify control issues and ways to improve efficiency. So the proposed plan has been discussed with and is supported by management. For the past couple of risk assessments, we had taken the additional step of running the proposed plan by a couple of other trustee committees to get their ranking of the proposed engagements. But the number of responses that we had received in the past were relatively low. So we looked to management to see where the most value could be gained from our limited capacity. There are 4 items in the universe assessed as high inherent risk. There is 1 control assessment of limited controls and 1 control assessment of significant opportunities for improvement. So I do like to provide an overview as to how these are being covered and why, some might not be addressed at this time. So succession planning was assessed as having limited controls. A succession planning advisory engagement was completed last year. Absenteeism is both a high risk and it has significant opportunities for improvement. Now, an absenteeism audit is on our radar for a future plan, but this was noted that as an area that is currently undergoing changes. So we would go in and look at that after the fact. Student and staff health and safety and well-being, which was ranked high risk, is at least partially covered by our current analytics work, looking at the course choices and available extracurriculars. Resource capacity and allocation was identified as a high-risk area where we could provide limited value at this time. And as well, the high-risk critical incident management area is being addressed through the proposed business continuity planning engagement. So the proposed plan does require audit committee approval. Although we have prepared a 2-year plan, we do recognize that risks, priorities, and controls can change over time. So as a result, the plan is subject to change on approval of the audit committee if new information becomes available. So we can amend the approved plan as appropriate to remain agile to the key risks of the board or to address new needs as they arise. Another option would be to address any new requirements in the next 2-year plan. So not the current 2-year plan, but the one that would follow this. So that concludes my presentation of the proposed 2-year plan that has been recommended for the audit committee's approval. I would like to express my appreciation to the business process owners, many who took the time to respond to the risk assessment surveys, as well as Executive Officer Snyder and Comptroller Harris for providing feedback during the development of the plan to ensure that it will meet the needs of the board. So I'll now turn it back to the chair for any questions or thoughts from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sincerely appreciate your report. Are there any questions about what is being proposed? Seeing and hearing none, then may I please have a mover? Can you go to the screen, Manju, so I can see people's hands? So I don't always put, thank you very much. We have it moved by Trustee Wong, seconded by, thank you, External Member Pilkey. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. That's carried. And moving now to 7.3, the Regional Internal Audit Team Status Update, December 2024.
And through you, Madam Chair, I will again turn the floor back to Paula Hatt, the Regional Auditor, to present this report.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, my report on page 127 of the agenda package includes a brief update on RIAD activities. So we do have some areas of progress since the last meeting, including completion of the risk assessment and development of the proposed audit plan. And we also started fieldwork on the data analysis engagement. Going forward, we expect progress to resume shortly on the incident and complaints related engagements. The resource assigned to this work has pivoted. He was pivoted to the risk assessments, but now that the bulk of that work is done across our 6 boards, he will be resuming the work on these 2 engagements. As I mentioned, this was just a quick update, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on this? Seeing and hearing none, may I please have a mover to receive the update? Thank you, Trustee McLean, seconded by Trustee Wong. Thank you. And moving on, thank you very much, Ms. Hatt, for your reports. Moving on now for information only, the Audit Committee Work Tracker, Executive Officer Snyder.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, this is just an information report that tracks the work of the Audit Committee per Ministry Regulation 361-10, and it's here for your information.
Are there any questions on this particular report for information, the work tracker? Seeing and hearing none, then a motion to receive. Thank you, Trustee Art, seconded by Trustee McLean. All in favor? Thank you very much. Now we're going to, we have a few private items, and then we'll ask staff to leave so the Audit Committee can meet with the auditors privately, should the committee have any questions for the auditors without staff. So for now,
The door.
oh, sorry, a mover and a seconder to move it to private. Thank you, Trustee Art, seconded by Trustee McLean. Favor? Thank you. So I'm just going to wait to see if there's anybody online that shouldn't be here for private.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think we're fine for private. No, I'm sorry, I'll ask Lauren Zhang and Ronnie Felsen. I'll ask everybody but the director